What's up, everybody? Yes, welcome to another edition of Rocket Live. Thank you all so much for joining us live right here, right now, as we do on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I am here today with the amazing Meridith Grundei. She is so great. I'm so happy to have you on today. Thanks for joining me. Really appreciate you.
Oh my gosh. Heck yeah. I'm so excited to be here and have a fun conversation with you, Chris.
I know. I'm so pumped to get into all of it with you because you've got such amazing background and disclaimer, Meredith and I have known each other now for a few months. We've had many active conversations, but I'm really excited to dig in and have you share your story and your background with everybody and all the cool things that you are doing. So we'll be getting right to that in a little bit. But before we do, just want to do some quick housekeeping at the top. I want to thank you all once again for joining us live. For those of you watching on the different platforms, if you're watching over on YouTube, please feel free to hit that subscribe button. So that way you get notified every single time we drop a new episode or go live or drop a new video. If you're listening to the audio version of this, please hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to this fine audio version. So that way you also get notified every single time we put a new episode of the podcast up. And I want to officially also recognize our official show sponsor, Coffee with Carrie Podcast. It's a great podcast. I've been a guest on Coffee with Carrie, Carrie Zarb's podcast a bunch of times, and she is awesome. And the show is great. It's a mix of interview and game show, and it's just a load of fun. There's a lot of laughing that goes on. So make sure you check out the Coffee with Carrie podcast anywhere you can listen to podcasts. And of course, you can watch the video versions over on YouTube anytime. And a little shameless self-promotion for myself, head over to my coaching group called the Let's Rock Group. Head over to letsrockgroup.com if you want to become a part of what we got going on over there. If you want to learn how to become a personal branding expert and learn how to stop yourself from shouting into the void and feeling invisible, that's what this group is all about. It's helping you to get noticed. So if you want to learn how to improve yourself over there and get noticed, head over to the letsrockgroup.com. And with that, enough of this shameless self-promotion. I want to get into my guest right now, Meridith Grundei. She is an amazing coach. She's a professional speaker coach, and she's got her own coaching called Grundei Coaching. And we met, as I always feel like I say every single episode I do this, we met on the big CH, the clubhouse. And it's amazing how fast friends we've become and connected and share so many amazing stories and have so many crossover similarities. So I want to welcome you onto the show. Thanks for coming. You've got such a really cool background in improv, acting, theater, directing. You have your own podcast, and of course, as I just mentioned, you're a business coach helping people to become better public speakers. So I'm gonna throw the mic over to you, Miss Grundei, and tell everybody your story. What are you about? What do you do? What do you do? What do I do?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. First of all, I just want to do a shout out for you, because if people are watching this right now and they're like, what's the group coaching thing that Chris is up to? And what do you mean personal brand? Dive into that, because I have seen the content. I'm a part of that group, and it's amazing content, and it's really not a lot of money to get a lot of freaking fantastic wisdom. So I'm just saying, okay. You should be packaging that stuff up, and you should be rich. Tell your wife right now. Anyway, so my story is that since I was 9, my parents were worried, I think, because I didn't have any interests by the time that I was 9. Those parents at that point were running their kids to soccer and ballet and clarinet or whatever. And so finally I was like, Mom, Dad, I want to take a dance class. And they said, what? Great. So they something. So I went into a dance class and started dancing and was on stages and danced, I would say, pretty regularly until I was about in my mid-20s. And in that journey, when I was about 15, there was someone watching a performance. I had to do a triple turn, stop, and then say, when I grow up, I want to be just like Wonder Woman. And she's like, you have a wonderful voice on stage. You should be an actor. So I then took acting classes and had wonderful mentors throughout my life. And then I ended up just kind of like not like really honing in on one thing or another. I became kind of what now I can embrace with confidence, a multi-passionate human being, because not only did I like acting, but I liked directing and I liked dance and I liked doing experimental theater and I liked improv. I mean, I was just kind of like, I wanted to do it all. I think I pretty much did everything but musical theater, which is funny now that I'm in New York. Anyway, so I moved to San Francisco, California from Colorado, where I grew up when I was in my early 20s. And I took an improv class with the Bay Area Theater Sports, and I loved it. And then I met some people who invited me to be in one of their improv groups, and we called it Ad Nauseam. And we would perform in this little cafe. And from there, I ended up in sketch comedy groups, and I was in one for several years in San Francisco, then moved to Chicago and interned my way through IO Chicago, and then was a teacher at the Second City for 4 years, where I was instrumental in developing their youth program.
Oh, cool.
And one of the first classes that I taught was to a group of like preschool kids. And so what do you do with preschool kids when you're teaching improv? It's a little bit like herding cats, and we would pretend. Yeah.
It's almost like preschool kids are already just improving as it is.
Yes, they are. And so you have to kind of give them a container to improvise in. So it'd be like, let's go grocery shopping. So you'd have a bunch of kids running around with imaginary carts, picking stuff off of the grocery store and yelling what they're putting in their cart. So total beautifully organized chaos. Right. And so I did that. And then from there, ended up teaching adult classes. And then I had an executive coach that I was working with through the Chicago Sketch Fest and at the Second City. And he was like, hey, Meridith, I want you to come help me with some of these clients that I have. And he was using this technique called, it's like an assessment, kind of like the Myers-Briggs or DISC, but his was called the Berkman assessment. And he said, I'm doing these psychological assessments with these teams, and I would love for you to come in with the improv element so that we can highlight some of these different personality types and see how people can work together and use these different personality types as an asset, right? Because oftentimes people collide because one person is a creative type and the other person is more of a strategic, right? And so that's what I started doing. And that was several years ago. And I actually still work for the same executive coach, Dennis Schroeder. And occasionally he'll call me in for an occasional gig here and there. Not so much during a pandemic, though. Well, yeah. And it's been wonderful. And I really actually loved teaching business professionals how to step into these uncomfortable places and to be able to be on their feet, to make eye contact with each other. And I gave them permission to not only learn new tools for how to work with each other more efficiently and effectively, but I also gave them permission to laugh and to enjoy themselves, which ultimately builds trust.
Absolutely.
And I loved it. And so I still do it.
You know, and I love what you were just saying there, because what you're talking about, I think, is so important. And it's something that so many people I know, like, they struggle with. It's not easy when you become very like self-aware of it and you're used to sort of doing your thing for so long, doing it the same way. It's really hard, and it can be super scary. And I know it's not easy, especially for, you know, a lot of folks out there who are very introverted and it's just not their way. But it's the things that I know that they're looking to change. They want to do it. And there's a big fear there of doing the things that you're talking about. And it's very uncomfortable. It really is. Like, and, you know, I mean, I know we you and I have said it, and it's, you know, but, and it's one of the big buzz statements out there is, you know, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. But it is really true, because, you know, for certain things to be able to like happen, if you want to like create any kind of change, like in your life or what's going on around you, like you have to make a change. You have to do something different. And yeah, it's gonna feel weird and a little icky and it's gonna be uncomfortable. But like in order to get to, if you want to be here, like you've got to make these steps to go there. And a lot of it has to do with the things that you were just talking about. Like eye contact is can be weird for people. And, and kind of, as you and I have said too, lots of times ditching the script. It's like, it's really hard when you've been doing it for one way for so long and you've got your routine and you've got your way, but it's not working, but you don't know how to break out of that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also, it's your way of doing things and the habits that you have formed for yourself, but it's also this perception of how it's supposed to be done based off of how you've seen everybody else do it, right?
Yeah.
And so part of what I'm inviting people to do is to think a little bit outside of that box and say, okay, when I'm applying, so I'm going to back up just a smidge just to talk about like the applied improv piece of it and why I use improv in these corporate settings and to help people become better speakers is because there's no real world consequence when we're working in this way. And I'm giving people these games, exercises, activities, or however you want to frame that, so that they can explore these and push these comfort zones and take risk and fail, and there be no real world consequence, right? So then what happens once we do those exercises together, then we can debrief that and we can ask the question, well, how does this exercise we just did, that we had some laughter and we learned some stuff, how does that apply to the day-to-day? So how do we use these skills, right? And how do we use these skills together? And then in that, I also invite in, how are you creating experiences for your audience, right? Because this way hasn't really been working as efficiently. So my question to the listeners or people watching right now would be, how effective, let's just say internal presentations, how effective do you think they are on your team? And how often do you give a presentation and then have to go, there's too many questions still lingering. So then you find yourself back in the conference room or on your team Zoom call to try to answer some of those questions that weren't answered because it wasn't clear what the key takeaways were. And so I think that's what we bump up against, is that it's about creating experiences so people remember the content so that you can move forward with whatever the agenda or the project is. But we can't do that if the takeaways aren't clear to begin with. And then we end up losing money and time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's very well said. And I think those are really good, valid questions to ask too, because I don't think those are questions people ask enough, and they're good to ask because, finding out the answers to those questions, I think are really telling as to like, where you want to be, what you want to do, where you want to achieve it. Because a lot of what we've been talking about, people get really stuck in their ways. And a lot of the things that they're doing are things that were learned because they saw other people doing it. And those people saw other people doing, and those people saw other people doing it. And especially in corporate culture, that's, you're trained. Like, you go through the process, or your colleagues that you're working with, or departments, or all these different things. Like, this is the way it's done. And so, okay, like that's the way you do it. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's always the right way, or it used to work, but times change and things change, and you have to change with the times and the expectations, and how people are interacting, how people are communicating, how people want to be presented to, how people want to absorb information. You have to bear that in mind. You can't kind of stay the same old and go, well, that's on them. It's not on me. And it's like, well, it kind of is on you, like, because they're telling you how they want to be interacted with, and you're not listening to them.
Well, I think you hit upon, like, listening is huge. I think to be a compelling speaker, to be in any, whether that be one-on-one or networking or standing on a stage, I think being a really great listener is key. And so a lot of the work that I do is pushing people up against that to be better listeners, right?
Yeah.
And then the adaptability piece is also what I heard you speak into, just to reflect that back is like, I think, yes, it's about being adaptable. It's about being able to handle change with grace
Mm-hmm.
because we're funny little humans. We really don't like change. We have a difficult time with it. And so we have to figure out how we can thrive with change and what is best going to serve us in those moments. And so I think a lot of that has to be that also goes back to self-care and how we're taking care of ourselves so
Yep.
that we can be available for the whole, right? Kind
Mm-hmm.
of like the oxygen mask
Yes.
metaphor, right?
Yeah.
What good are you if you're dead?
Right.
So yeah, just going back to just self-care and listening and being adaptable, and how do you prepare yourself for change, because it's going to happen, as we have all learned
Yeah,
in this last year and a
absolutely.
half.
Yeah, we've all been forced to, whether we wanted to or not. And that's how we've all been affected by this in one way or the other. We've all been forced to change something about our lives. From small to big, we've all been forced to make those changes. One of the things that you said earlier, and I'm going to dovetail this into your podcast, because you said one of the things that you teach is also teaching people to not ask for permission. And I talk about this a lot as well, which is, never ask for permission. And this is the one, if there's any lesson that if there's one lesson that being in punk rock and hardcore music taught me back in the day, being involved in all that, was never to ask for permission. You just do it. You want to be in a band, do it. You want to put out records, do it. You want to put out a zine, publish a zine that talks about vegan, straight edge and whatever, then you do it. Like there's no asking for permission. And if there's the biggest takeaway I got out of that time from being immersed in that culture was that. And I love, and that's something I talk about. And I love that that's something you said that you work on with your training, and especially in that corporate world, is not asking for permission. And I love that you have a podcast that's of the same title of Are You Waiting for Permission? And I think that that's so cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to quote Tina Fey. She has that quote, say yes and figure out the rest later, which is, I feel, right? And so for me, it's like, we had a podcast interview today with a couple that lives in Colorado. They have Colorado Shoe School, which is awesome because they live right. You'll like this, Chris, and I'm digressing a little bit, but they live right next to this VFW. It's called The Grange, and it's in Bellevue, Colorado. And that's where I used to go see all the punk shows.
Nice.
And I met Grundei there. So I knew you would appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. No, that's great.
So they live right across from there. And so back on track now. What we were talking about was this, the idea of the what if. Right. So we can either go, oh, what if I bought, and then in their case, they bought this train car and they rehab it and now it's a tiny home. Right. So it's like, what if I buy the train car? Well, you can sit there all day long with what ifs. What if I did this? What if I did that? What if blah, blah, blah. But it's not going to happen unless you act on it. Right.
Yep.
It just won't happen. And it might fail miserably. You might bomb. It might be the worst idea on the planet, but you will have learned something and you will have grown from saying yes and to the what if.
Yep. I agree with that 100%. And I always say, I think we all need to change the vernacular of how you use the word failure. Because failure for me means, the actual word is that it's a technical term of that piece of equipment failed, that wire failed, machinery, technical wise. When a person fails, it's not the same as a piece of machine that just stopped functioning or broke. We're not broken, we're not we didn't stop working. It means that our definition of failure really needs to be looked at as hey, you tried something awesome. Maybe it didn't go the way you wanted it initially to.
Right.
But hey, you did it. You got off your ass and you did something and so that's not a failure to me. That's actually, it needs to be celebrated of you went and you did something. It didn't work out the way you wanted. It sucks. I get it. But you know what? You're still here and you you get to do it again. You get to try it again differently with the lessons now you just learned. Like that's what it is.
I mean, there's a lot of success stories of people that just hit rock bottom and then built themselves back up again because they learned so much from those failures.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just encourage 100% for people to, yes, give themselves permission. And the podcast that I co-host with my partner, Joseph Bennett, who he actually lives in central Mexico. So here's how giving permission piece. Yeah. So he lives in this amazing little artist town called San Miguel de Allende, and it's in central Mexico. And my family, and this is how we met. My husband and I, in 2016, sat there in our living room in Lafayette, Colorado, which is outside of Boulder, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, what else is there? What if we rented our house out and bought an RV and drove it away from here? What if we did that? And then that's what we did.
That's awesome.
I
love that so much. It's so great.
And we bought this 40-foot. Don't ever buy a 40-foot RV and drive it to Mexico. We learned a lot of lessons by doing that.
Lesson learned, gas.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. If anyone is thinking about buying an RV or a trailer and driving it around the country, then please talk to me. So anyway, we bought this 40-foot bus, and we got into it with the dog and the cat and my 6-year-old at the time, and we're like, she's gonna be schooled on the road. This is road schooling, and then we took off for a year, and we drove up through the South. We broke down in Memphis, Tennessee for 2 weeks. Best town to break down in, by the way.
Nice.
Just
FYI.
Yes. Yes. Anyway, we went to Stax. It's just, it's so rich with history, and speaking of music, like, it's amazing. So then we got back on the road, and then went up to the Ohio to visit some relatives, dropped down Austin. We went to tons of places, Houston. And then we ended up in Mexico, and we drove, I think we hit almost every state in Mexico, almost. We officiated a wedding in Tulum. We spent time in Oaxaca. it was awesome. And we were flying back to the States because I was still working at a university teaching, and my husband was doing the same. So we're still gigging, but we were doing it from the road. And I met Joseph Bennett. And I went to this micro theater project in central Mexico in San Miguel, and he was sitting there and he was performing in one of the pieces. And then he's like, "Oh, you're an improviser. Will you come teach an improv workshop for my expat group?" And I said, "I will. Yes, and." So then we became friends.
Wow. What a great story. That is awesome.
And that's how we ended up in New York. Was that because of that trip?
That's how you ended up in New York.
Yeah. Cause we're like, hell, let's just move to New York. We've always wanted to live there. We're not getting any younger. So let's go to New York. And so here we are.
And here you are in New York.
In New York. In New York.
That's awesome. No, that's such a great story. Thanks for sharing that. That's really cool. It's amazing too. Like you did all that in a year. So it's like, you think about like how much, like, a year doesn't seem like a ton of time to do things in, but when you look at like how much you can do in the course of a year, like that, like getting an RV, traveling around, going to Mexico, all that stuff, and still gigging. And that's a really cool story. That there's a book in there for sure.
There's something in there. I got to figure that out. I got a few books in this brain.
There's a through line in there that you can pull from for sure.
Yes, thank you.
We had a comment earlier on, and actually we got 2 comments here. So one is from Andrew Milden. It is my buddy Drew from Drew versus the World podcast, an awesome podcast. Listening is so important. You have to be like an improv actor always. Yes, and so I love that. Thanks, Drew, for checking in. And we've got Paul Angelo Bernardo. Don't ask permission. I agree. Kudos. Never ask for permission.
No.
No.
No. Because if you think about it, if my kid asked me for permission for everything, she'd have a really sad life.
Yeah, for real. It's a lot easier to say no than it is to say yes. That's so cool. So I want to talk about, I love the podcast is great, by the way. So make sure everybody goes out and checks out Are You Waiting for Permission? And it's this podcast, you can pretty much get it anywhere you get podcasts at this point, right? I mean, there isn't a platform out there that I'm sure you can't listen to it. So make sure you check it out. All the links are in the show notes, by the way. So as we've been talking to Meridith here and she's been sharing, I've had for those of you on the audio version listening to this, I have been flashing up websites and all that. So you can get access to all of Meridith's links through the show notes. For those of you watching, you can also click on any of the links in the posts where you're watching this, and there's the links to Meridith's coaching site, her podcast, and also we're going to talk about her group coaching that she launched and on the Mighty Networks platform, and it's the Confidently Speaking Club. And I love this. I am actually a member, and it's just like the coolest thing in the world because I loved when you and I first met, and you were like, oh, I'm improv and I do this and I've done theater and directing and I'm involved in all this. And I use it to help people become better public speakers. And that's something that, I've been trying to do for many years and wanting to get better with. And I feel like that, there's also a certain style that I enjoy because I don't ever want to be or talk like somebody, like, I don't want to talk like somebody that's not me, I always want to be me, but I also want to get better at the way I do things publicly. And so, meeting you and hearing you talk and all that, and then getting involved in a group, I'm like, oh, this is a great fit for me because I feel like you and I are very similar. And so I'm like, all right, how she's doing it, how she's teaching, this is something that I dig. So this speaks to me. So I joined the club, and it is an awesome club. So why don't you talk a little bit about the club and and like what people can expect in the club and all that cool stuff.
We won't tell them the secret password yet, though. Just kidding.
No secret password.
Yeah, there's no secret password. No. So I started Confidently Speaking because I started to see a need for the group coaching element. I love teaching and coaching one-on-one, and I know my clients get a lot out of that. And then there's this component where now you need more of an audience, right? There's that group kind of mindset that I think is really helpful, that I also benefited from when I was improvising and when I was on teams, right? So there's that collective mind, that group mind. So I decided to start Confidently Speaking. And the way that I've organized it is that we have one live session a week on Wednesdays from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern time. And each week on rotation has a specific topic. So the first Wednesday of every month, we focus on managing anxiety and nerves. The second week of every month, we focus on stage presence, on-camera presence, and content. And then the third one, we focus on storytelling. And then I leave the last week of the month for a Q&A so that I can hear how it's going for people, offer feedback. That's also the time where I'm like, what else do you need? Do we need accountability partners? Do you need a platform to practice right now? Who can make it? How can we support each other? And because that peer-to-peer support feels really important, and I want people to feel held in their journey. And the way that I structured those classes is I always start with an improv exercise. So we do some sort of an improv exercise, then we talk about it, and then we talk about how it's going to apply to what either we're going to be doing or what people are individually working on. And so and then we just had like a 30-day video challenge, and there were a couple people in that 30-day challenge, which you participated in as well, which was awesome.
I didn't make it to the 30 days.
That's okay.
I went on vacation, and then that was the end of it.
That's all good. That's what life happens, right? We got to be gentle with ourselves. But it's amazing. Like one person hadn't really done any live video at all, and she is killing it every day, man. Like clockwork.
She is
killing it. And it brings me so much joy. I cannot even tell you, to like see people grow in that way is fantastic. Like,
it's the most rewarding thing. Yeah.
Oh, it just makes me kind of want to cry.
Yeah. No, it is. It's awesome to be able to, do that and help people along. And I mean, it's the same thing. It is greatest joy to help somebody and see them implement it and see it work, and then they
Yeah.
get the results, and it's become so transformational for them. It's the coolest thing.
Yep.
It
It's
really
really
is.
great. So that's Confidently Speaking. And then I'll put up a week, every Monday I put up a prompt. I put up TEDx talks if I think it's relevant to the
Mhm.
content that we're going to be exploring that week. I'm going to start doing member highlights on LinkedIn now, because we've got just so many badass people in the group that I just want to make sure that everyone knows,
Right.
who's in there and how they're serving their community as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool idea. I like
Yeah, you
that.
can steal it.
I think I'm gonna
You can
steal it
steal
now.
it for your group.
That's a really cool idea. I like that a lot. So it's a really nice way to help people out too, and
Yeah.
get them exposure to like your network, and maybe people want to connect with them and all that. So I think that's a really cool thing.
Because it's all about lifting each other up, right? I mean, we
Oh,
have to be.
absolutely.
We
You
have to
have
be
to.
lifting each other up.
You have to. You absolutely have to. I got Pedro checking in, Mr. Pedro Maciel. Great convo. Thanks, buddy. Mr. Pedro, the host of the X Factor of Safety podcast.
Oh, I love it.
And awesome, awesome dude. So yeah, thanks, Pedro, for checking in, and thanks for listening today. Really appreciate you. Yeah, I agree 100%. Like lifting each other up is huge. I mean, that's the big thing. Like, talking about the days of being involved in music, it's like that's what you did. Like you played with other bands, you became friends with other bands, and then what you did is you put each other on shows, and you tried to band together and like help each other out. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm on this show, so I'm going to ask these bands to play with me because it's and that's it. And you just kept doing that and doing that. And you tried to bring each other up through the scene. And that's the same way I look at what you were just talking about. Like, when you help each other out, like me even doing this show, the whole reason why I do the show is exactly this. Like, how can I help the people in my network and in my life reach potentially other people through the people that watch and listen to this show? Well, I'll have them come on, and this will give them a reach. And so that's what that's what this whole show is about. Like, just exposing other people in my network to people in my network.
Oh, I love it. I think it's great. It's wonderful. Yes, more of that, please. In this world today, more of that, please. Lifting each other up.
Well, I mean, when you talk about old school business and how you do business, but I'm like, there's nothing like more old school and more foundational than what we were just talking about. I mean, that's to me is like how you do business, is like you help each other out, you be respectful, you network, you build relationships, and eventually, you build a really strong community of people that are all just like helping each other out, and that's it. That's the basics of doing business. If you want to know the 9-figure secret to building a business in 90 days, like, well,
am I allowed to swear? It's like, just don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Don't be a dick.
Don't
and
be a
then
dick.
you'll probably build your business.
Yeah. I'm telling you, do not need to buy a system.
No.
You don't need to put a second mortgage on your house to buy a system.
I mean, you can if you want to. I mean, if that's what you want to do, then
if that's what you want to do, but I'm telling you, there's a better way. There's a less expensive way of doing that.
There is. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, this was great. I am so glad that we had the opportunity to speak today and go through everything that you're working on. I mean, you have a lot of stuff happening, which is really cool, and I love your story. Once again, this is why I feel like that we've been kind of the way we've connected very quickly with one another is because I feel like we definitely share a lot of very similar paths and journeys, and I think being the fact that we both come from like creative backgrounds and all that, and how we're using basically what you and I are doing is leaning our creative backgrounds into like helping people talk, get over themselves, like make themselves more memorable, like really help them with the things that they're struggling with, and help them get over the fear of public speaking or speaking better or putting themselves out there or leaning into like aspects of themselves, leveraging their personal stories to like really stand out, and not looking at those things as weaknesses as much as they are like absolute strengths, like looking at all the parts of your life of how you got here, where you came from, because I think at the end of the day, like it's not even, I think at the end, I mean, listen, we're all human beings Most of us are
Most of there
most
you
of us are
go.
most of us are human beings, and you know, we want to like listen and know that we all have shared similar experiences. And I think when people share those stories
Yeah.
of who they are, where they came from, what they're about, how, you know, how they got to where they are, it's the stuff that, you know, we sit around campfires telling each other for, you know, thousands of years, just passing stories down. And I think that that's the thing that I think everybody needs to realize, is that those things are not weaknesses at all. Like that power of the
Mhm.
storytelling. You had that great. I was in there. Your the one in the group, the video, the group chat that you had about the power of storytelling, and how it needs to be really utilized and looked at and embraced and owned, as opposed to like, you know, not doing that. You know, I think it's a
Yeah.
really cool thing to do.
I think people are that there's a fear of being overly vulnerable or sharing too much or over. I just
Right.
think, but stories are what connects us. It's where we find our commonalities, and so if we can take that risk and tell a story, if it's something that is not, we would just to go back to like the way that things have been done. If the way that people have been presenting is without story, then maybe this is your opportunity to present with story so that you can connect better with your audience. And if anything, they'll remember that story and they're going to remember you. And that's what's most important, right? And it's how you're serving your audience. It's
Yeah.
about what you're offering to them so that they can also grow. Um, there was one other thing you said, and I know we're wrapping up here, but
No, it's all good. It's all good.
there was one thing you said about leaning in, which I just think is so
Yeah.
beautiful, because I think that's a difficult thing for people to embrace and give themselves permission to do, because and totally like debate me on this, but I feel like culturally, especially in the professional world, we are so often taught to pick a lane.
Yep.
And so that has made it challenging for a lot of people who I would consider multi-passionate or uh, right, and which I
Yeah.
would assume most
100%.
people are multi-passionate, they're just not owning it. But to
Correct.
really take those talents that you do have, and I love the idea of like leaning in, and it took me a really long time
Yes.
to be okay with that. And so if there's any big mistake that I've made throughout my life, it has not been leaning into the sides of me because I was compartmentalizing that
Yeah.
professional business world
Hmm.
away from the creative world. Even though I was teaching improv, I was doing it in this very kind
Right.
of like, I'm a serious business
Yeah.
person kind of way.
Yeah.
And I've got my pantsuit on.
Yeah.
So, you know
My
what I mean?
business
Like,
pants.
it's my business pants. And I'm just going to do a plug. I took Seth Godin's freelancers workshop, and
Uh-huh.
it just really actually helped me quite a bit to
Mhm.
see that even fuller, and how to lean in more into those talents and how they feed me as a professional in the world who's also helping to serve others. So
Yeah,
it's an asset. It's a
I
gift.
I agree 100%. And you know, it is something I talk about a lot, the leading in
Yeah.
of, you know, and owning who you are. And yeah, it took me a long time to get there, and I actually feel like it was something I totally used to do, and then I regressed big time for a long time and didn't realize it. And
Hmm.
then I realized it, and I was like, "Whoa, like I don't, you know, I'm not sure you know, like I want to get back to doing that, because I realized that that's something that, you know, like telling the stories of like being involved in punk and hardcore and all that. Like I never talked about that stuff ever, because it's like, oh, well, you know, you're professional. You don't talk about that stuff in professional settings. Oh, you don't talk about Star Wars. That's not like, you know, all the stuff that I'm like so nerdy and geeky about, and like rock and metal and, you know, and I, always just sort of like never, you know, I did it and then I pulled it way back. And then at some point I was like, you know what? Like when I started seeing again that like, wow, people really responded when I nerded out on like Star Wars or talked about like, you know, metal and everything and you know, and all my music background stuff and, you know, all those silly things that like,
Hmm.
you know, I think people would be like, you know, I used to be like, oh, well, you're just being too childish. Like people don't want to hear about, you know, when you collected Ninja Turtles, like toys, you know, like You know, like
I want to
what
know
is
that
it?
story someday.
Right. And it's not that great, but it's like people always go, "Oh my God, you talk about this stuff like it." I'm like, because I remember it. I remember going in and buying these things and like the way I
Yeah.
felt like owning them. And like I just,
Mm,
it's the things that I hold on to some of that stuff, and but yeah, to kind of like I didn't use any of that stuff for the
right.
longest time. And it took me a while to get back to the point of like you gotta do this stuff. Like when you
Mhm.
do it, people respond to it because they have shared similar experiences, and then they get excited wanting to talk about it, and they feel good knowing that someone else out there feels the same way they do or felt
Yes.
the same way they do. And it's amazing how doors open up to you much quicker that way
Mhm.
than not. And that was
Mhm.
the big realization for me of like, wow, there is real power in who you inherently are, in
Yeah.
all the things you're interested in. And obviously you got to pick and choose your times to use certain parts of that. I think are crucial. Read a room. But at the same time, it's something that the more and more I kind of chronicle different parts of like my life and my story and all that, the more and more I get to be like, wow, actually I forgot about this moment. This is pretty fun. It's funny to me, and I think other people would find it funny to hear
Yeah.
that, it something that happened to me. Like, and I think people would find a similar thing in their life that they
Mhm.
could relate to.
Mhm.
So I just
Mhm.
think that kind of stuff, and the reason why I say lean into it, and you agree with it, is that it does open access and it does open doors a lot quicker than I think most people realize. And
Yes.
I understand the fear in it because of the way things have been in the past of how people have been taught, how they've come up, and I get it.
Mhm.
Um, I got to put my pantsuit on, it's a whole thing. I get that, but at some point you can kind of shatter that glass. I'm telling you,
And just be
and
yourself.
it's freeing when it happens.
Oh, it's so freeing. If you look on my LinkedIn page, and I even get a little scared. I'm like, I have this picture of me balancing on a stool that I put in my banner.
I saw that. I saw that.
And I have to say, when I posted that, I got a little scared, like, oh, what are people going to think? What are be? And then I had the moment of like, mm,
Who
that's
cares?
totally me. That's what I do. I'm a goofball. Like I don't totally take myself seriously 100% of the time. I do commit 100%. I commit to my clients, right? I
Of
show up for
course.
them. I do my work,
Right.
but I'm also fun. I'm a fun person, and I'm going to balance on a stool for my photo shoot because I can.
Right. Because you can. And if I could balance on a stool, I would do that too. But I know I can't. And I know the picture will be of me falling in midair. I'll be like, oh,
I want to
like that.
see
And
now.
that'll be the
Yeah.
picture. I'll be like, and that'll be the picture of me. This is the moment right before I fell and broke my back. But I'm gonna use it here on LinkedIn because it looks funny.
Because it looks awesome. Oh, so
uh,
fun.
yeah,
So
this was
fun.
great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, we could probably sit here and gab for
Yeah,
like
totally.
another
Oh,
like
thank you for
hour and a
having
half
me.
for sure. I say this, but it's true. It's like you get
Yeah.
going and you just like start rolling and all that. But no, I really appreciate you coming on. This was great. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, your time, your background, all that stuff. I want to make sure that the people, once again, watching and listening to this, use the links in the show notes, in the captions, or the posts, all that stuff. For those of you watching on screen right now, hit up Meridith, go to her website, grundeicoaching.com. You can use that link. It'll take you right there. Check out the podcast, Are You Waiting for Permission? Wherever you listen to podcasts. And check out the group coaching, which I am personally in. And it is awesome group. It is fun. You will learn a lot. You're gonna have a great time. Confidently speaking club. So I gotta learn how to actually speak.
You got it.
Confidently speaking
Confidently
club. Yeah,
speaking.
yeah. Head over there and make sure that you sign up because it's a very cool club and you're gonna learn a ton about
Thank you.
becoming a better public speaker from Meredith Grundei, the improv master. Any last words?
Oh, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to have this conversation. This has been really fun. Thank you.
No, and I'm glad you could come on, and I appreciate you very much. So thank you for joining us today, and I want to thank you everybody in the audience. Thank you everybody for joining us live today. Thank you for participating. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for sharing. Obviously, I encourage you to connect with Meridith. Use the links in the show notes and in these posts to connect with her. And also, please feel free to connect with me because there are links there to connect to me personally and connect to my coaching. You can go over to rockitgrowthagency.com to connect with me through there, or you can join my group coaching site, which is letsrockgroup.com. And we're doing lots of fun stuff over there as well. Of course, if you have any questions at all, feel free to hit me up directly and I will get back to you as soon as I can. And make sure you check back next Tuesday because we'll be going live again with another awesome guest. And I think I'll even be going live again at some point again this week. I think I've got someone else coming up. So be waiting on that announcement coming soon. But thank you all for joining us. And we will see you guys next time. And remember, always be authentic, always be yourself, and always remember to rock it. Yeah. Cheers.